605 Speaks. We're live today with a famous South Dakotan. I love getting famous South Dakotans. Could it be Cheryl Ladd? She's my favorite famous South Dakotan because I wanted to be one of Charlie's Angels. I think I wanted to be Jacqueline Smith, though. Really. I don't, maybe Cheryl Ladd will never talk to me. Although I have several friends who knew her growing up. So maybe I have an in. It is not Cheryl Ladd that we're talking to today. We are talking to one of my favorite South Dakota world traveling famous entertainment friends. If you have spent any time on the comedy scene in southeastern South Dakota, as well as he's been all over the place, California, Minnesota, Colorado. I don't know, any place where they'll let you in wearing nothing but a sweater. So I'm excited to bring on, and also we wasted a good 8 minutes of comedy before we started the camera. We were so funny, so much time wasted. But welcome to my screen, my friend, Dan Bublitz Jr.
Hello.
Hello, Dan. I haven't seen you since you moved away again.
I know. I keep moving away. That's what happens. I come back and then I leave and then I come back and then I leave and then I come back and then I leave.
This time, though, you left for a fine lady.
I did.
We're all
lady. My fine lady is from South Dakota. That's why she's a fine lady.
Yes, but she moved and you followed. Well, that's why you moved to Minnesota too, is to follow her, correct?
Yes. Yep. Because of her job. Her job is why we move.
As it should be. You should go where she tells you to.
Exactly. That's exactly.
So we did warm up a little bit and talk about who you are and what you do and where you're from. What makes you perfect for 605 Speaks is you are originally a South Dakota native from Huron. Huron? Huron. How do you say it?
I say Huron.
Huron is how I've always said it too. I say the H-E sound.
Yeah, I do too. Huron.
I don't know how it was meant to be said, but that's how I say it.
I've always called it Huron. Huron or Huron. Sometimes it depends on how fast I'm talking.
No one talks that fast in the Midwest.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I had to move.
What is your hometown most famous for besides being the birthplace of Dan Bublitz?
Well, it's not the birthplace. It's just where I grew up. But Huron, I was born in Watertown, South Dakota.
Oh!
But Huron is most famous. Well, there's two things. One, it's the home of the world's largest pheasant, or as you know, we grew up calling it the world's largest cock because that's funnier. Mm-hmm. And then it is also the home.
Which, for the uninitiated, is the term for a male fowl, a male
pheasant. It's a cock, yeah, exactly, male bird. So home of the world's largest pheasant, and it is where the state fair takes place every year, the South Dakota State Fair.
And I almost feel guilty to say I haven't been to the state fair in years.
I don't know that you're missing much, but I have, but I haven't either, so I can't say.
I didn't even go to the Sioux Empire Fair since 2017, and that's right here
in your backyard.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good corn dog as much as anybody, but I just haven't. I'm a bad Midwesterner. Fairs are a big deal.
I know. I mean, I'm not a big fair person either. Once in a while, it's fun to go I like some of the fair games, even though I know that they're crooked and, impossible to win. But some of them are fun to play. But I'm not a ride person. I'm not. So there's that. And a lot of times, especially in South Dakota, especially at the state fair, a lot of the people they're bringing in for entertainment are not my cup of tea.
They're kind of country. There's a lot of country.
It's usually country or super old has-been bands that people
American Idols.
The
Sometimes
fair? The state fair?
didn't they have a Kelly Clarkson or something like that? Maybe or some of the leftover American
Maybe.
Idols.
I don't know. I've never known that. I've only but when I was younger, I do remember they did get some bands that were relevant in their relevance, like New Kids on the Block played at the state fair in the height of their fame,
To
and maybe
some
a
of my
few others.
friends,
But
they're still at the height of their fame.
what?
I'm
Who?
friends with some quote unquote blockheads.
Oh yeah, real,
Yeah,
and they still think they're at the height of their career. Well, they made a comeback, didn't they? I
they
don't know.
did.
Maybe they'll play the fair again. I don't know. I've always known though, like the Sue and Pryor Fair, they always get better entertainment than like the state fair, in my opinion. But that's I'm just one.
We probably get a slightly more diverse variety, but
Yes,
it's
that's what
still
I'm
pretty much country and rock and roll. I mean,
Mhm.
Beyonce
Whereas-
and Jay-Z haven't made the cut.
No, but you've had comics. That's one thing. I mean, the only comedians that really ever play the state fair, at least, and I could be wrong, but that I know of, the only comedians that have ever played the South Dakota State Fair are Williams and Ree, and they play it like every other year. So and I don't think their act is changing every year.
They are South Dakota icons, though.
They are. They are.
I mean, they carved out their niche and have done a fine job with it. They're icons. I can't believe this is the first time in this project of talking to people that I think that's the first time anyone's mentioned Williams and Ree.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, it's
get them on board
because I am a comedian. So it's I learned something about them too, because I read a lot of books on comedy, and I've been reading history books on comedy, and there's a history book called "We Had a Little Problem with Real Estate," which it's mostly about Charlie Hill, who is a famous Native American comedian, but it covered other Native American comedians as well, and they I'm trying to remember which is which now. I'm terrible with that.
Which one is Williams and which one is Ree?
Yeah.
For the non-South Dakotans, they themselves call themselves the Indian and the white guy.
Yep. Oh, Bruce
Absolutely.
is Bruce Williams. Okay, that's what I thought. I was just wanted to make sure that I had that right. But I learned through that book he was born in Huron.
Really?
So, yeah, I did not know that. I knew he was from South Dakota, but I didn't realize. But he was born in Huron, and I don't think he grew up and went to high school there, but I think he lived a few years as a child in Huron, according to that book.
That town is just spawning all kinds of funny things.
Yeah, apparently. And then, I mean, in fame, Cheryl Ladd lived there. So
I know. I get such a kick out of that.
I mean, and that was something I remember as a kid that was a big deal. It's no longer there, but that we had the barn, which was I wouldn't say famous, but famous for the town, I guess. But it was a big restaurant in Huron and they had, and I don't know, again, memories. I'm a lot older now, so I don't, as a youth, I don't, remember necessarily if that was the correct, but if, in my memory, her family had something to do with that restaurant. And therefore, there was a lot of memorabilia and pictures of her career in the barn at that restaurant. So now that where the barn is there's a Walmart and a bunch of other.
And your picture is up on the wall there.
It probably is. With a do not let enter.
Right. You can't self-check out.
My photo, and instead of my name, it just says banned.
Right. Banned from a Walmart in Huron. Let's talk about how does a kid growing up in anywhere in South Dakota decide they want to be a full-time professional comic? I mean, it's one thing to be the class clown, but it's another thing to decide this is going to be my moneymaker.
Well, for one, it took a while. I didn't make the decision as a kid. I wasn't even a class clown really as a kid. I mean, I make my friends laugh and I try to be funny within like friends group, but I wasn't a class clown. In fact, when I was even in high school, I was deathly afraid of public speaking. Like I couldn't
Wow.
do, I had a hard time giving speeches, anytime I had to do a presentation in front of a class, super nervous. I couldn't talk. It was, a lot of looking down and stumbling and stuttering over words and things like that. I was absolutely terrible at it. But on the flip side of that, I could write. Like when it came to, like essays and, things like that, I could BS my way through that easily because I was pretty good with writing words. So my goal when I was in school, I ultimately wanted to be a writer. Like that was, and maybe a screenwriter or a novelist. That was kind of, a poet. And I still write poetry and stuff like that, but that was what I wanted to do. And then I got married right out of high school, and that I just did
That's
what most people in the Midwest do, which is you graduate high school, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, and the cycle continues. And that's what happened for me. And I think
a very South Dakota thing to marry the high school sweetheart or marry the first person right out of high school.
Yeah, first right out of high school. We didn't go to high school together, but yeah, it's a very very Midwestern thing to do. Absolutely. And so because of that, I didn't go to college. I guess I attempted to go to college before I got married, and that did not last very long. I was not a fan of that. Well, and I graduated high school a year early. I skipped 11th grade, and don't think that I'm super smart because I'm not. I'm dumb because I graduated early. I should have stayed another year.
Because that makes you too young to enjoy the next level of things.
Well, that and my grade point average sucked because I overdid it on that last year. And then I started, I partied a lot as a youth and a lot of drinking and not really keeping up on my grades. And so when I graduated high school, I had a pretty low GPA compared to the semester before I graduated.
Because you didn't have that year to buffer it with like home ec and stuff like that.
Yeah, which if I would have went back for my senior year, I could have took easy classes like shop and home ec and like I had all of the requirements for my diploma done. But I could have just went back and did these easy classes and had like a 4.0 grade point.
My senior year was a soft serve year too. I had finished all of my credits, and it was like I took kitchen basics, consumer math, like home ec. Yeah, I made a duffel bag. It was great. It was great.
That's awesome.
I think I still have it somewhere. It was pink and gray.
Was what?
It was pink and gray. I think I still have it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I made a clock, I think, when I was in middle school, but I don't know where my mom had it, and then it no longer exists now. That's a whole other thing we don't need to get into. But yeah, I went to Huron College too. There was a college when I was growing up. It was a college town, and yeah, I took I went to school maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks. I don't even think I made a whole semester, but I was also working nights, trying to work nights and go to school during the day. And it wasn't working, was not working. And I didn't like some of the teachers that I had. So I ultimately dropped out right away. And then I met the gal that I got married to. And yeah, then, like I said, I went and started working. And I think comedy was something I was always intrigued by and maybe, in the back of my mind kind of wanted to do. And that had a lot growing up with, even though I didn't do a lot of performance stuff, I never did plays or any of that kind of stuff because, again, stage fright and fear of public speaking got in the way of that. But I always loved humor. Like growing up, my dad, at a very young age, I was exposed to things like Benny Hill and Johnny Carson. I remember watching Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke when I was like 10 or 11, so I got exposed to a lot of that stuff. And then as I grew up and then in high school, I was a big fan of Saturday Night Live and In Living Color and like all these sketch shows. And so I was always, and even, into my 20s, I loved Last Comic Standing, which was a reality show for comedy, and that was like one of my favorite shows to watch into my 20s. So I think it was always something I was interested in.
And when you
But,
grow up in South Dakota, like, and you had talked about the majority of your South Dakota experience, East River, like you said, here on Watertown. You named off some other small towns when we were talking. Did you say Carthage?
I did.
You
I
lived in
lived there.
Carthage?
Yep.
Like you've been in a lot of small towns.
I lived in Carthage and I worked in Howard.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
There isn't much to Howard anymore, I don't think. I think
yeah,
that's going to be
I don't think there ever was much to Howard, honestly.
Yeah.
There was one like a manufacturing type place, a packaging company. I don't know if it's still there or not, but
when you grow up in an area like that where the towns are very small and they're either centered around, like you said, a manufacturing place, or they're the gas station for the farm kids, when you see things like Saturday Night Live and In Living Color, it's like, wow, I can't believe that world is out there. Like you can
absolutely.
It seems so different from even now. It seems so different. We have such access to the world through the internet and things. And I'm like, how could people live like that? You know, everybody is your cousin here. Everybody is related or works together, or knows somebody. And how can you get away with anything?
Right. Well,
is that how you ended up heading as far away as like California? Was that just a goal to get away with something and not have somebody tell your mom before you knew you were done getting away with it?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, when I eventually moved to California, that had to do with the gal that I was dating and the opportunity. And then by then I was doing comedy, so it was like, oh, I can go to California because everything I knew about comedy at the time was what I saw on TV, and everything that came from everything comedy wise was either in New York or LA. And so in my brain, I started comedy in South Dakota. I started at Fat Daddy's in Sioux Falls when they were still there. And then I did stuff in Watertown because I was living in Watertown when I started. And then, it was like, oh, I'm ready, after 5-6 months of comedy. It was like, oh man, I'm good. I'm ready. Let's go. And I went out to California and I realized I wasn't. But what brought me out there was I was planning to go to pursue comedy, and the girl I was dating, her family lived in San Diego, and she wanted to move back closer to her family. And so that's how I ended up out there. But even then, like, you talked about growing up in South Dakota and seeing that stuff on TV and not being able to necessarily comprehend that world that exists and being able to be part of it. And that's for me, like, I've been doing comedy 12 years now, and I still have moments where it's so surreal. Like, when I lived in San Diego, I worked with a friend. His name's Brandon Young, great comic, but we produced stuff together. And we produced a show for Dana Carvey. I got to hang out with Dana Carvey. It was so unreal to be in the same room as this person.
As the church lady.
Exactly. As I grew up watching on TV, and now I'm not necessarily his equal, but I am his colleague. We're on a show together. We have a working relationship.
Right.
I'm not on his level, but in his world. And it's been the same with other celebrities and comics that I grew up watching that I've got to work with or meet through the journey. And it's still, even now, it's when I work with somebody that was famous when I was a kid or is famous, it's still so surreal to think that I was a kid that grew up in Huron, South Dakota, and now I'm doing this. Like, I still think about that, and it's like, wow, how does that even happen? Like, because again,
it would be even more surreal if those people were coming here and these things were happening in South Dakota.
Yeah, exactly.
If you open a club in Carthage, I will totally VIP that opening night. I will totally people.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's coming to comedy in Carthage. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I don't know about that. But it's funny because, even the idea of starting to do comedy in South Dakota is kind of unimaginable, even now. But now South Dakota has a great comedy scene. We
do.
Especially Sioux Falls has a good hub. and there are little hubs within South. There's a scene out in Rapid City, and there's stuff in
Mhm.
Watertown, and there's stuff in Aberdeen, and there's stuff popping up all over South Dakota. And of course, we've got the comedy festival that we do every year in Sioux Falls now. So
Yeah, let's
comedy,
talk about Snow Jam.
yeah. So Snow Jam it's a 3-day comedy festival that we do in Sioux Falls in January, where we're celebrating comedy and snow. I mean, that was the idea, is to, if we were going to do a comedy festival in South Dakota, it's
Let's
only
do
fair
it in
that
the worst time of the year.
we make the comics suffer through the worst time of the year, because you can't
Yeah.
experience South Dakota unless you're experiencing a South Dakota winter. It's
Yeah.
that's how it's got to be.
Right.
So yeah, so that's why we did that. It was kind of a funny thing, but Snow Jam, it's this 3-day comedy festival, and it's a 501c nonprofit. We're a nonprofit. We raise money for local charities within Sioux Falls. We've, for the last 7 years, we've been raising money for Special Olympics. This year, I can't announce who they are, but because we haven't made our official
Fresh
announcement.
charity this year, huh?
But yeah, we're actually going to be. I can say this: there's going to be a couple charities this year. We're and they're fresh ones. It's so we're
Are you already taking submissions for people to?
Yeah, comics can already submit. Submissions opened up at the beginning of June, and we've already had a bunch of people submit. The one thing, our festival has really gathered a lot of great feedback, and it's got a good reputation within the comedy as a community, not just locally, but as a regionally and not international, but national recognition. There's a lot of comics come from LA and New York and all various parts of the country to do the festival, because what we do is we bring 30 comics from across the country to Sioux Falls for 3 days. And it's a mix of comics from across the country and local talent from South Dakota. And we showcase that talent, and all the net profits that we make go to whatever the charities are. But comics who come, they have such a great experience, and then they go back to their scenes and they tell their colleagues and people that they hang out with how much fun they had at this festival, and that they need to submit next year. And so then those friends do, and it keeps growing every year. But one of the coolest things is that a majority of the comics that have come to the festival, one of the most common things is about how great of a city they think Sioux Falls is. They come to the festival and they fall in love with Sioux Falls. It's because of the people and the cool things that there are to do in Sioux Falls, and they don't think about that that's possible. When they're submitting, they're like, South Dakota, what's there? They
Right.
see what's in the national news, which is terrible politics, and that's what people think of South Dakota that don't live in South Dakota. Then they come to South Dakota, they come to Sioux Falls, they meet these cool people who aren't necessarily what the national spotlight of politics is. And they meet the people, and they see they get the great food, and they get the great, different attractions, and they're just like, wow, this is amazing. I've had comics say that they were tempted to move to Sioux Falls because it was such a great experience, and they were there for like 3 days in the winter.
In the winter, that's exactly what I was going to say, and that's in January,
and they're still loving it. So
yeah, that's fantastic. When you have lived outside of South Dakota, not just traveled for work, but when you've been living outside of South Dakota, what do you miss most about either any of the towns that you've lived in or the state in general? What do you get homesick for?
I think for me, it's probably friends. I made a lot of great friends in different parts of the state. And I'm still friends with a lot of the people. I owned and operated a comic book store in Watertown for like 6 years, and a lot of the people who were regular customers became really good friends, and I'm still friends with them today. So a lot of what I miss when I'm not there, when I've lived in other places, is just my friends and family, the people. I mean, there's nothing specific as far as things to do, or because I'm not really an outdoorsy person. I'm not a hunter. I'm not a fisherman. Like
Right.
that kind of stuff isn't like I'm not missing that. Most of the stuff I do is indoors. I can do it wherever. So it's the
Right.
people.
And then you have the unique ability to, a lot of people when they move away from home, when they come back, they've got to try and get everybody's schedule together and see all their friends. You have the unique ability to be like, so I'm back in town. I'm going to book a show. You can see me there.
Yeah, exactly. Come to the show. That's what I want now.
Right.
But even that, I do, appreciate when friends come to shows and stuff. But at this point, I don't expect it anymore. I mean, when I first moved away, a lot of friends would come to shows when I come through and tour, because for the 5 years that I lived in San Diego, about the only time I came home was to do comedy. I set up tours, and it was a way to come home, visit a little bit, but still like pay for the trip. So I was working. So it wasn't like long visits. I was a day, do a show in Huron, I'm there for the night. Do a show in Watertown, I'm there for the night. Or Sioux Falls, there for the night. And then I'm on to the next.
I-29 corridor.
Exactly. I'm on to the next, and then I'm on to the next. So it's like boom, boom, boom. So I didn't get to spend a lot of time with people, and that was a good way for people to come, back then. A lot of my friends would come to the shows. They'd be like, oh yeah, let's do it. And then we would hang out after, and it was a lot of fun. But now I've been doing comedy so long that, I think it at some point that like wears off. Friends are like, yeah, I've seen you do comedy. I've got better things to do. And I understand. I take no offense to it.
We know
except that you don't come to my shows. You're the only one that offends me.
I don't come to your shows?
I haven't seen you at a show in a while. I think the last time you came to a show that I was on was the parking lot show.
I loved the parking lot show. I came to Snow Jam.
Were you at Snow Jam this last?
I was at Snow Jam. We took our picture together by the.
Oh my god, you did! Oh my god, incredible! That just goes to show you, but that just goes to show you how much my head is in Snow Jam that I don't even remember.
Right.
I'm in work mode. I don't even remember.
You had a very jazzy, snazzy suit on, and you were telling me that the snow globes, I did not realize they were snow globes. I thought they were some kind of shooters of moonshine, and you were like, don't drink that.
Yes, don't drink that.
So you were still in work mode. Don't drink things that you shouldn't.
I was, don't drink this. That's not what it's for.
Right. I do think that there's definitely, speaking of the I-29 corridor, a lot of comics that start here, that start in the South Dakota area and things like that. It's a good path. You've got Sioux Falls, of course, the center of the universe. I'm here. But you've got to the north and the south, the two college towns, Brookings and Vermilion. You can hit the Watertown, you can hit Sioux City, and then the Fargo, Omaha things. Those are a drive that people can do. And if you go, if two of you go, one of you can drive up and the other one sleeps, and one of you can drive back after the show because nobody has money for rooms. So that I-29 corridor, I think, gets a little bit better traffic from local performers than, say, the middle or the west side of the state.
Oh, probably. Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to travel up the 29 back and forth. And like you said, there's more major stops. Because even if you're not stopping in the smaller towns, the college towns, Omaha to Sioux Falls is about a 3-hour drive, and Sioux Falls to Fargo is about a 3-hour drive. So it's and that's a good separation. Because if you're doing an independent tour, one thing for me when I would do that, I would do mostly just, through South Dakota. And it was different because I had pull in these places where I lived. So I had drawability because my friends would come to the show. Right. Now, if I was going to do a tour like that, I probably wouldn't hit these towns that are all an hour and a half from each other. Because Watertown to Sioux Falls, or Watertown to Huron's about an hour and a half drive. Huron to Sioux Falls is just over an hour and a half. And Sioux Falls to Watertown is just an hour and 15 minutes. So that's not a lot of space. You don't want to do shows so close together. Yeah, you want to spread them out. And that's where, like I said, going up to 29, Omaha, Sioux Falls, Fargo. Because even if you look at tour schedules of big performers, and not just comedians, but like bands, a lot of times a band they'll play in Omaha, and then they might do Sioux City or Sioux Falls. They won't ever
Right.
do both. They'll do one or the other, and then they might do Fargo, and they might not even. They might skip Fargo and go straight to Minneapolis because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to put
Exactly.
some separation, because if they do, if you do a show in Sioux City and then the next night in Sioux Falls, well, you're not going to draw anybody from Sioux Falls to Sioux City and vice versa.
Right.
So it has to do a lot with logistics and stuff. But having that, definitely comes in handy, being able to just, because then even if you want to go further, you've got, down south of Omaha is Kansas City, and that's, like a 5-hour drive from Sioux Falls. So you could really put a good tour together just down the 29.
Right. And you could stay at Super 8s the whole way.
That's right.
That's right. What do
If you want to get adventurous, you go to Aberdeen and you stay in the original Super 8.
Why is that adventurous?
Because you're going to the first Super 8.
Oh, you implied like it's got a secret.
Well, no, just adventurous because you're in the scenario.
Original.
In the scenario, you're going up the 29.
Yeah.
So it's adventurous because you got to go off the 29 to get to Aberdeen.
That's true.
That's where I was saying the adventurous is.
What do you think that South Dakota lacks in venues for all different kinds of entertainment? Because you've booked some really creative comedy shows. I've been on a panel of one of the game show style ones. I know that you've done pulp pinup with the burlesque comedy, and then stand up. You've also done a one-man show that was less comedy, more lean towards your more serious side. Yep. And having produced shows in other places, I often hear people talk about we don't have what we need for entertainers to keep coming here. So what do you think that we either lack, or what gems do you think we do have that people don't realize are here for people that are somewhere between an open mic and Reba McEntire?
Well, I mean, obviously you need a variety of venues, but a lot of it, and I can't speak to other places because I don't know, maybe it's the same. But one thing, like even producing our comedy festival and trying to work with local venues that we run up against, one of the main reasons we don't do a lot of the big venues is because they're costly. Mm-hmm. And so, it's the same thing with an entertainer. They're trying to, wherever they're going, if they have to pay for the venue or whatever, they're going to want to go with the venue, ultimately the cheapest venue that suits their need, because it's about profitability and making money. And the more you can reduce your overhead, the bigger your bottom line is. So I think from what I could see is there's plenty of venues in South Dakota. I just don't think they're willing to work as well as they could, money wise. I think they're too trying to get their cut, which I understand their business too. Right. But I think some of them get a little too greedy with the cost of, I think they're pricing their venues and what they're doing higher than what it's worth,
than what it really offers the performer.
What it's offering versus what it really is. They're pricing it like they're offering an amazing thing, but really it's not.
If I get there, I've got to have my own mic and my own riser and my own.
I got to provide my own door people, and I got to provide my own sound technician. And it's like, well, if you have to do all of that, and then still pay a ton of money for a venue, what's the point of paying for the venue? I mean, if I didn't pay, it's just sitting empty. So it's like, well, if on an off night, now I can see, like on prime times, like on a weekend, you're charging more for the use of the venue because it's a prime time spot, but during the week you could charge less for the venue because guess what? It's sitting empty anyway, and you have to pay rent. If you own a venue and it's not being used, you're still paying rent, you're still paying electricity, you're still paying for all the things. So it's like, why not if there's an opportunity to bring somebody in on an off day and let them pay less for the rental of the venue, why not do that? Because then you're still bringing some money in, and you're bringing some sort of art that might not come through otherwise, which I
Exactly.
think is so I think really it's South Dakota has plenty of venues. I think they lack the business owners lack the mentality of arts and entertainment as far as what you have to do to bring it in, because like there's a lot of great venues, but they're all, like I said, they're all strict on their fees. Like
Right.
there's a great theater in Watertown at the event center, the Heritage
Yes.
Theater. It's a beautiful theater. I've done shows there. I paid the rent there, did the thing. It's a beautiful theater. I don't think it gets used as much as it should, and that's probably because of rental fees. People don't want to pay the rental fee for it.
Right.
There's plenty of venues like that throughout South Dakota that could get utilized, but because they're so corporate, we can't deviate from any pricing, they don't get used, and because of that, that scares people away.
And I think there's something to be said too about the temperament of Midwestern audiences. They like karaoke and they like cover bands. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's such an instance being, I mean, we are the middle of the country, and things start in the east and start in the west and trickle in. And so we've had like tastes of the things, and by the time they get here, our tastes have already developed where we want what we know is going to be the
Yeah,
same.
no, absolutely, and it's the
We
same
enjoy
thing
our sameness.
with the majority of people in the state when it comes to comedy.
Mm-hmm.
What they want for comedy? They want Jeff Dunhams. They want Larry the Cable Guys. They
Right.
want these people that they've seen on TV that they think that's all that's what comedy is. That's what they
Right.
want. Versus, oh, maybe I go watch a local comedy show and see what
Right.
happened. You know what I mean? And that's really, and it's unfortunate because you're missing out, because a lot of those comics, they're corporate acts now, and they're not, and
They
not
started
corporate in the
somewhere though.
sense. What's that?
Well, they started somewhere, and that's the thing.
They did absolutely, but
If you were
now
part of,
they're a corporate situation, and when you go to an independent comedy show, you're going to have a better time because you don't know what's going to happen, and
right.
that's where the true comedy comes from, especially open mics. But like, you really, there's nothing like experiencing live independent comedy, or even going to a comedy club, that's bringing in a well-known comic. It's still, they may be lesser than a giant, comic that's doing stadiums, but going to a live comedy is way different than watching it on TV or Netflix, or watching a big act like that, because
Right.
you just don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen in live comedy.
Who's your favorite big act?
Hmm. Well, I really like, I mean, two of probably my influences in comics that I really like would be, I really love John Mulaney's comedy and Mike Birbiglia. They're two of my, and I think it's because they're both really great storytellers, and ultimately that's what I'm trying to be.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of work to do because I got a lot of, I can write a good story, but I got to make it funny. So there's a lot of work in punching up my stories and making the stories interesting. And that's something that they're very good at, their storytelling and punching them up. And
I do often say there's a horse in the hospital. Like, that's my favorite John Mulaney thing. I have to say my favorite like big name act is Cat Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that in South Dakota I'll ever see a Cat Williams.
Probably not. But
Even
you know where you would see a Cat Williams? Probably Sioux
Chicago.
City.
You think Sioux City?
Well, Kevin Hart played Sioux City.
Yeah, he's short.
I'm sure that's why he was there, and probably filled out. It had to do totally. He was short.
They were like, let the short guy in. Let the short guy in and be funny. Yeah. that's the thing. I feel like Minneapolis, Omaha, Chicago, to see some of those
more diverse comedy. I mean, that's what it is. It boils down to diversity. You'll
well,
get some
that are less like you said. I think of like the Larry the Cable Guy and the Redneck Tour as being middle-aged white guys. There's plenty of middle-aged white guys in South Dakota that I can laugh at for free.
right? Exactly.
Bring me some comedy that like expands my knowledge of the world, you know?
Yeah. But that's where too, like, I mean, it has to do with trying to appease the masses. And that's,
right.
That's what, like, in a state like South Dakota, it's going to be harder to get a Dave Chappelle to come through or a Cat Williams, because, I mean, there is an audience there. They have an audience, but do they have enough of an audience to sell out?
And I think their audience
enough tickets to make it worth their while.
Right. And their audience skews younger, therefore less expendable income.
Yeah.
Less money to spend on entertainment.
And right now, and a Dave Chappelle ticket is not cheap. I just saw that he's doing a show tomorrow in Minneapolis at First Avenue. They just announced it yesterday, and of course there's controversy, whatever, because of his recent comedy. But
that's why he sells tickets.
Oh, I know. But his tickets was like starting at $125 or something, or $150 for a ticket. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a big investment. I look at that, I'm like, holy crap, that's almost my car payment.
That's a year's worth of Taco Tuesdays.
Exactly.
Just like your shirt. Tacos dreams of you.
Yeah, not if I go spend $150 on a ticket for Dave Chappelle. They don't dream of me. They're like, well, I guess we're breaking up.
Right. But people, when you go see a comic with controversy, part of it is because you hope there will be controversy at this show. You're hoping to see this thing, like Chris Rock after getting slapped. He sold out, and it's like you weren't going to see him get slapped again.
His ticket, the price of his tickets jumped, and the amount of him selling. I mean, he started selling out, and then the ticket price went up too, like immediately.
Right, and that was just because people hoped to be there when he said something about getting slapped. You just want to be able to say, I was there when that happened. And even if you look at other forms of entertainment, if you look at music or anything else, you might have a controversial, you might have Marilyn Manson, always has a lot of controversy. You're not going to go to his show and you're not going to go there hoping you see another controversy. You're just hoping he gets through the song this time. Mm-hmm. But comics, there can be...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're hoping something controversial will happen that gets leaked.
They're going to drop that one line
there. And ultimately, it's about being part of the show, in the sense where it's like, without being part of the show, having its experience. That's what it is. It's having an experience. You experience this event that happened. You were a witness to it. And that's ultimately, like you said, what a lot of people want when they go to a comedy show, especially when they go to see somebody that's controversial.
Right. What do you think? So now you're living in Colorado now. Mm-hmm. And do you say Colorado or Colorado?
Not Colorado.
I think it's both ways.
It could be. I don't know. I'm new. I don't know what the proper way to say it is. I say Colorado. So
I have friends that tell me I'm always saying it wrong because I say Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Colorado. Maybe it was Colorado back in the old Western days and the cowboy days, but I don't know. I call it Colorado.
And I know when you first moved there, you spent some time, seeing what the scene was and going as an audience member to open mics and shows and things like that. From the perspective of being in the audience compared to here in South Dakota, like open mics and things like that. What are you seeing there? What are the differences? What are the things that are the same?
Well, I mean, the same is there's a bunch of comics trying to do comedy, and most open mics are the same, where it's the comics, same group of comics doing the same material for weeks and weeks and weeks and not really developing. Um, but that's also a difference. That's one thing when I was in Sioux Falls, while there are comics that'll do the same jokes for a while, they're polishing it, which is good. You need to do that. But eventually they do write new material. And they're more like Sioux Falls is a smaller scene. So it was more inclusive to the comics who would join because we didn't have a lot of comics. So if somebody new wanted to do comedy, we were very welcoming and wanted them to be part of the group. And because it was a smaller scene, there wasn't as much rivalry. We're in this together, the cream of the crop rises together kind of thing. Right. So we're very like work together and not just doing comedy. Like that's one thing I really miss about the Sioux Falls scene, at least when I was there. I haven't been there in years now, so it may have changed. But when I was back in Sioux Falls, when I moved back in 2016, it was still a small scene, but it was very, like I said, it's always been pretty inclusive. But what was nice is that we would do stuff outside of comedy. We weren't just, oh, we got to do comedy and then I don't want to ever see you again. We would go do karaoke on a Friday night, or we would go catch, for an example, Zach play in his band, or whatever it was. We would go do other things together and do social events, not just as comedians, but as friends, which I think that's a cool aspect, where when you get into the bigger scenes, you have some smaller friend groups that probably do that. They're more, I guess you would call them cliques, that they probably hang out outside of comedy, but it's not like the whole scene, And the other thing with that, and there's way more rivalry in a bigger city because everybody's trying to get, there's only so many spots to get. And, it's a supply demand situation. Everybody wants the spots. So there's too many people for the spots. So there's a lot of rivalry there. But at the same time, bigger scenes produce bigger and better comics because there's more opportunity for stage time, in Sioux Falls. And I know now there's a lot more, but when I was there, I think we had 2 or 3 open mics a week, if that. Mm-hmm. Here in Colorado, and I don't live in Denver proper. I'm an hour north, but in Denver, you can probably get up 2 or 3 times a night if you really wanted to hustle. And that's almost every day of the week. So, you can get up way more. So you'll develop faster as well because you're getting more stage time.
I don't want to hustle.
Yeah, you got to hustle. Yeah.
No!
I mean, I'm not at that point. I'm not hustling because I'm past that.
I think that's a good observation of what the scene in Sioux Falls, in a lot of different kinds of entertainment. I mean, there's improv, there's more than one improv group, but they're all connected and friends, and there's stand up and everybody's friends, and there's everybody tends to support everybody's outside of that niche thing. I also think from a female perspective, it's a pretty safe industry around here to be in entertainment, like as putting it all together in a group. In Sioux Falls, yes. Like there's been very rare episodes of someone being inappropriate to a female performer, or like when I did interactive theater, if the crowd gets too handsy, the crowd will turn on them, or if one comic were to be inappropriate to not just a female but any one other entertainer, pretty much the group self-regulates, and I think that definitely
there's a lot of self-regulation, that's for sure.
Right and I hear and see things from women in other areas where it's not that easy and it's not that safe. And so
I believe that 100%.
You yourself had just posted about comics. You need to stop to stop saying what you believe and not showing how you believe. I
deleted because I was like, I don't want any more. I'm trying to get away with posting stuff that can cause drama with people online and whatever, and I'm just like, But
But that's true. I mean,
true.
that's a good
It's very
example.
true.
I know Zach went through something like that earlier this year. He had posted that a show that he wanted to go to and support, it came out that there was some nefarious dealings, and he's like, I'm not going. I'm not even going to sell my tickets to it. I'm going to take the loss, and I'm going to be public about why we don't welcome
Yep,
this into our town.
and that's integrity. And
Right.
and there needs to be a lot more of that, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, you'll never get rid of bad people where they're everywhere. I mean, you can only do so much, but again, you know, it has a lot to do with having integrity. And if you're going to be a social justice warrior, you can't just be a social justice warrior on certain
Keyboard
issues.
warriors.
You know, yeah, exactly. You gotta, if you're gonna stand up, or
Right.
don't say anything, just because then you're just a hypocrite, and
Right.
nobody, and that's just as bad as the shitty people. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I
Yeah.
don't know if I could swear.
I don't know. It's not monetized. It's not. I don't
Right.
sponsor or edit. So, yeah. Um, what what's a good final thought on being the funny man from the Midwest? How do you see your development of your comedy when you're I particularly think about your time in California, because that was when you were younger, and that's a huge cultural shift to go from South Dakota to go from the SD up here to this SD down there to San Diego. How is your comedy that's Midwest at heart, Midwest based, received by people not from here?
I mean, it depends on what it is. I mean, that's with all comedy. That's one thing I've learned over the years. It has to be relatable, you know, and I can't go do jokes that are specific to South Dakota and California, not because the people won't like it, but they won't know what I'm talking about. And if they can't relate to or if they can't relate or don't know what I'm referring to, it's not going to be funny. It's you see that a lot with comics who do a lot of regional humor, you know, or they'll do local humor, and then they go to another town and try to do that same stuff, and those people have never, you know, they maybe went to that town once in their whole life, or if at all, and they don't have any, you know, they don't care about that town, so it's like it doesn't translate to them. So I think that was kind of the biggest thing. I mean, the biggest cultural shock for me in moving out to California was learning about diversity and inclusion and things like that, because that's I've learned that through comedy. I mean, I grew up in South Dakota, which anybody that knows anything about South Dakota knows that it is a very white dominated, conservative, red state. There, you know, there's diversity there. I'm not saying there isn't, but there's not a lot, and it's not always well received.
Right.
And that was the mentality that I was brought up on. That was the environment that I was brought up on. I mean, I remember when I went to high school, there was one African American family. There was a total of three of them. I think there was a sister and the two brothers, and that was it. You know, and then there might have been an Asian kid here and there, or a Hispanic family, but it was very whitewashed, you know, and that's all I knew. And even, you know, into adulthood, very, very, you know, the places that I worked, it was all the same kind of people. So when I moved out there was a lot more diversity and a lot more, you know, even sexual orientation. There, you know, when I grew up, I mean, I'm sure that they were there, but like not out in the open, you know, like
I would say even when I was in high school, it was still, if people were closeted, it was
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I moved out there, that wasn't it, you know, it was more not necessarily well received, but received, I guess.
Right.
You know, received in a more positive way than it was here. And I'm thankful for that. I'm glad that I had that experience, because that's made me a better person and a better human, I think, because now, you know, I can't relate to other people's experiences with racism and sexism and things like that, but I can be empathetic to those situations. You know, I can't, that's not my story to tell, you know, but I can, you know, I've had enough had enough experience, not necessarily experience, but I've been
Exposed?
exposed. That's the word I'm looking. Thank you. I've been exposed to enough diversity to be able to know that I'm a privileged white man and step back and be like, this is not my place to say anything. You
Right.
know,
Right.
you tell me what you need. I got your back, but
Right.
I'm just going to stand back and be your ally.
Right.
And I don't think I would have that same mentality had I not started comedy, because comedy is what brought me to California. And had I
Had you
not done
not got out
comedy,
of South Dakota while you were still young and impressionable?
and it was still close. I moved when I was 32. I wasn't
Just a
that
baby.
Instead, by some, but still old. You're past the impressionable years. You
Yeah.
know, your 20s are where you're real impressionable. I was past that, so I could have very easily been stuck in my ways. But that's not the kind of person that I am. I've always tried to be. You know, I've always had kind of my own moral compass where I try to be a good person. You know, I believe in putting good energy into the world, and that way you receive good energy. You know, I really believe in karma. So the more good that I can put in the world, the better off I'm going to be ultimately. You know, in the sense where
Yeah. Well, you make
well,
people laugh for a job. So I mean that's awesome. You make people laugh. It's for the children. You make people laugh for charity. So awesome. Well, Dan, thank you for reaching out and talking to me. And now whenever you say, Jenny, I haven't seen you at a show, I can say, well, I just queue up the video of you and watch.
exactly.
And then you'll probably be like, why aren't you a Patreon then?
Yeah, right. Why aren't why haven't you subscribed to my Patreon?
Yeah.
I thought you were a supporter. What's going on here?
Exactly. You know how much tacos cost, Jenny. Everybody knows you know how much tacos
exactly.
cost.
They add up fast.
Yes. Well, we want everybody to check out your website because that's where they can keep up with you. Podcasts.
Yep, I got the Art of Bombing podcast, which is a comedy podcast where I sit down with other comedians and they tell me about their worst shows. And it's very entertaining. And it gives a good behind the scenes look at comedy because we talk about the craft of comedy and getting better at it. So
And then you've got something brand new out now.
Yep, I have my album, which is streaming. It's available for purchase, which I would prefer people bought it because that helps me as an independent artist more than streaming it on Spotify, but it is there. It's called Strangers in My Basement, and the reason it has that title is because when I was living in Minnesota, I converted my basement into a comedy club, and I invited strangers over to my house, and I recorded my album in my basement in front of strangers, and it was really fun.
I don't know what's weirder, that you invited strangers into your basement or that the strangers came.
I know, right?
Like, I watched a lot of Dateline, and I tell ya.
Full disclosure, there was a little bit of vetting. There were other comics on the show, and it was kind of it was an invite only. So it was like
a speakeasy.
Yeah. Yep. That would be a better way to describe it. We kind of did like a speakeasy, like not just some random person could come. You know, I did advertise it publicly, but it was still.
You got to know the secret doc.
Yep. Gotta be vouched for. We don't want no weird people here. It's already weird enough that I'm trying to get people to come to my basement to watch comedy.
Middle-aged bald white guy invites people into his basement.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. That doesn't sound like the start of a horror movie, does it?
No, not at all.
But it was a lot of fun. I had, good audiences on both shows, and we recorded the album and got it all mixed and edited and chopped up to how I wanted it. And now it's available. It's where, you can get it on my website, which is danbublitz.com. And you can get it on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all the major places. It's there. So
nice.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I put a lot of work into it. I've tried recording an album in the past, and I never liked the recording, so I never released anything. So I'm very excited that I released this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I will have to check that out, and I will put all the links in the description of this video, of course. So thank you, Dan. I'm going to sign off. I hope it's not snowing where you are because I would be jealous. It's been super hot here.
No, it's been pretty hot here. I did yoga this morning outside, and I was like, yep, this is what hot yoga is.
I don't know if I would consider you doing yoga hot.
Well, temperature-wise, it was pretty hot. I don't know. I think you need to be more open-minded and think more about
probably
that.
do.
Me doing yoga outside is pretty hot. You should have seen my gym shorts and my cut off my shoulder shirt or whatever it was, sleeveless shirt.
If you did a video of that, I can make it the next click and subscribe for this one. Be like, here's the recommended video.
My pasty, pale skin out in the sun. Come on. What's not sexy about that?
Thank you, Dan. We're going to sign off. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, well, that was fun and quite revealing. I do hope to find a video of Dan doing yoga that I can link to. I'm going to ask him to put one out there now. Support local everything. Support local entertainers. Support your local comics. Support your local bands. Be the person that tips the kid that had stage fright until they finally did this show. Be the person that makes them confident enough to keep doing it, grow their craft, become a professional, expand their world, and then they're going to bring things back to your community and expand your community. And we definitely need some of that in South Dakota. We say diversity a lot, and what that means is we're sick of looking at ordinary pasty white chicks like me. Bring more people here that have seen the world, lived the world, can tell great stories, and bring that into your daily life, make your life more exciting. So support local entertainers left and right. Look into the Snow Jam Comedy Festival that will be in Sioux Falls. I will include the links here, especially because it is for charity. It's funny people doing good things, and that is good karma. Whatever you put out is what you're going to get back. So be part of that, putting out good things. Stay tuned. Upcoming 605 Speaks. I think I've booked a panel of weathermen. Yes, as much as I've talked about weather in this 2022 session of these, in August, we're going to have a full panel of South Dakota weathermen talking about South Dakota's other major source of entertainment, whether the wind is blowing, the sun is out, or if there's a plague of locust. So have a great day. Click on all of Dan's links. Tip your servers. Try the veal.